Thanks so much for tuning in for the final daily roundup from the 2021 Borlaug Dialogue. To discuss highlights and takeaways from the third day's discussions, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Deepa Thiagarajan, Director of Global Food Systems, Nutrition, Value Chain Programs in the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition at Michigan State University. Many thanks for joining us today. Telling us a little bit about what you thought about today's sessions.
Wow, today's sessions were just absolutely great. They were completely enriched with discussions on ag productivity, growth, and resilience for nutritious and sustainable food systems. So the thematic focus area of research and innovations was very timely and resonant, and that kickstarted this year's dialogues to culminate discussions on resiliency in food systems. Clearly, there's compelling evidence on strong positive relationships between agricultural productivity growth and food security, accompanied by reductions in poverty and more resilient food systems. So in today's discussions, we got a deeper understanding of how governments, donors, private sector can influence these drivers of productivity growth, and also the questions around what's working well, what are some of the constraints, how do we achieve greater political commitments to these kinds of decisions and investments, and how do we foster great capacity coordination, communication, and connection to promote innovation to lead us through these ideas. Clearly, food systems paradigm is getting more complex and complicated, and we have to absolutely maintain the focus on ag productivity as a cornerstone to our food systems. We also need to examine if our current approaches are generating our natural resources, are they improving resilience? What are the opportunities for increasing productivity? Can we move away from our staple fixation to critical nutrient-dense foods that we need in our food systems? Do we truly understand the linkages between productivity and increased access and affordability for healthy diets, and are we ready to leverage them? These are some of the key points that resonated not just today, but certainly throughout the week and culminated in the concluding sessions.
Great, thank you so much for that. So if we go to the first roundtable of the day, what were some of your takeaways from that discussion on nutrition-sensitive food systems? And were there any strategies that stood out to you?
Now, this session is something that is very close to my heart. As a research manager and the nutrition-sensitive food systems advisor for the Future Legume System Innovation Lab at Michigan State University, I was very much drawn to not only the topic, but also the panelists that were leading these discussions, and they didn't disappoint by any means. So the theme was, what are the creative solutions to increase food and nutrition security? Food systems must be managed better as nutrition security and income of people depend on it. We must prioritize solutions that not only deal with food or environment, but also have a people-centered approach. This is important not just for nutrition security, but for livelihoods, income, and social justice. Discussions were also about how this must impact people at scale, at the same time regenerate the diversity of systems. We have not been good at considering the diversity aspects. We need to take into consideration the aquatic foods that make up for a vast diversity of the food systems, and also integrate aquatic foods within the systems, the water-based systems, the land-based systems, and build upon the innovations and solutions for these water-based systems and make commitment for these investments as well, and recognize synergies between land and water systems and be very mindful of what actions we take can impact each other. The resonating thought was we need to nourish the systems that we participate in. And a lot was talked about the pandemic and the disruptions, but really it has opened our eyes to our strength and showed where our weaknesses and vulnerabilities lie, but gives us a chance to rethink what it is, what we're trying to accomplish, and what is the public will and political will that's needed to end the vicious cycle. So if you can maintain the capacity to have enough food, in other words, if we have abundance and we can distribute it to everybody, then we are already ahead of the game. But if we have a world of scarcity, we are in a very different world and very, very deep trouble. There's also this notion and the idea a neat thing about edible landscape, edible landscape being everywhere and hunger nowhere. As esoteric it may sound, we learned today that it's actually very achievable. So it takes new thinking, new partners, innovative collaborations. All of these can really deliver on this idea. And not just this idea, but deliver some of the very best food and the highest quality of food to people. So if we want the outcomes we want, which starts right from protecting our oceans and going all the way to protecting the health of people, we need to create more sustainability around the systems. And that is very clear. And we also heard from producers, smallholder producers, in the way they can be engaged in the process that can lead to more direct nutritional outcomes, especially for child and maternal health. And improved production, also improving the crop to be able to improve nutritional deliveries is equally important. Finally, I think panelists emphasized on accountability framework, needing accountability framework for our partners, for governments, for donor organizations, for private sector, civil society organizations, and for everyone to come together and say, this is what I can do for nutrition and commit to it. It was a fantastic session.
And a fantastic answer. Thank you for that. So on that last note, where about coming together, we can also go to the final roundtable of the Borlaug dialogue, which actually discussed international cooperation. So what were some of your key highlights from this session?
There were several highlights. Obviously, this being the penultimate closing session, it was very intense and very candid discussions that took place. Several key actions were identified, several approaches were identified, and several recommendations were also identified. Some of the key actions was, that we must ensure foods are safe to eat as part of the solution to key nutrition and public health challenges. As a food safety systems person, it was very heartening to hear that come across. And how do we do this? They talked about how to ensure research building a very strong evidence base and promoting nutritional diversity of many aquatic animals, plants, microorganisms that benefit human nutrition and health. All of that was included in those discussions. And then the second action point was to make nutritious foods accessible and affordable, which is something that we've been hearing nonstop, so that we can maximize social and economic impacts and prosperity, and also to support small-scale actors and inland fisheries and agriculture. So it's really, really important that policies are inclusive of these small-scale actors, as well as ensuring women and vulnerable groups and youth are at the front and center of these actions. So sustainable production of diverse, rich foods needs to be the mantra so that we can minimize the negative impacts of the climate changes and also increase our resilience and adaptation to climate impacts. The future of food systems was also discussed, and it's all about the environment. And food is something that we all relate to and something that we can do, but we really need proactive leadership and governance to support the leadership that is inclusive of women, indigenous people, and youth, as mentioned earlier. And there are several approaches were also discussed to mobilize these actions, driving improvements in yields and quality, getting good tools into right hands, and supporting dynamic local processes that focuses on people, on nature, on interactions between producers and processors at the center of the food environment, and also focusing on the core, the smallholders who are those that have the greatest struggles. I was very taken up with this notion that David Navarro said, that it's really not a binary choice, that these choices are not mutually incompatible. In fact, they very much are complementary. So as long as we can focus on results and give quality tools into right hands, and also focus on the processes, particularly where everyone matter, I think we will get there. To do that, we need to change the perception of agriculture. We need to build trust back into agriculture, that agriculture can be a very big part of the solution, and it can bring credible innovations in a way that promotes not only productivity, but also climate-friendly solutions, environmental-friendly solutions through partnerships that are inclusive, and then they bring equity thinking. So many takeaways, because this was a session on cooperation, so importance of cooperation across regions, across globes, within societies, and enabling and embedding innovations at all levels, but particularly at the systems levels to bring those best practices to the local systems where it actually counts. And then the very common theme was obviously on the importance of inclusion, because you heard President Barbara Stinson talk about how best solutions can come anywhere. So the more inclusive we are, the more likely we are to have the right kind of people involved. We're going to have the solutions or be part of the solutions to these very complex problems. And then lastly, in a very candid fashion, we heard in the importance of basing our decisions, our policies on science, and as much as we can, try to get the politics and the ideologies out of the way and be very pragmatic and rely on science. And then we concluded the entire week of exciting discussions with a sense of urgency. Actions cannot wait. There's a sense of urgency building off of the momentum from the UN Food Systems Summit and the Borlaug dialogues this week and the upcoming Nutrition for Growth in identifying and seizing the opportunities in food systems, and to be bold in ambition and imaginative in partnerships and rise to the occasion, because that's the sort of leadership we desperately need.
Great, that is a great call to action. Thank you so much, Deepa, and it has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you and getting your insights on today's session. So thank you so much again for your time.
Likewise, thank you very much for the opportunity. All the best.